Hey, beautiful mamas. Welcome to Fun Rich Mom. I am Mitch Blackford, and I am just super excited that you're here today. As always, it just makes my day that we get to spend this time together. And if you can't hear it in my voice because you're just listening, but you're watching on YouTube, I've got a big old grin on my face. And that's because I just finished such a fun conversation with Alyssa Brade, who is my guest today. You're about to listen to what we just talked to. She wrote a book called Mommy Needs a Minute, which, oh my gosh, how many times does that come out of my mouth, right? Just Mommy needs a minute. Hold on. I just need 1 minute. Like, I know you're counting it up right now too. And I loved it because we just had such a great conversation and just let down the curlers out of our hair. I don't know why I said that, but just let your hair down, just let it all out. I even threw some disclaimers out because I was like, whoa, we're just being super raw here. And I love it because she got into some of the research that she did for her book, like even about the differences in Gen Z and millennial parenting and how culture has affected us and what's really going on. So you're definitely going to want to listen to this. You're going to have such a good time as well. So with that, let's have some fun and let's get started. Alyssa, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Mitch. How are you doing?
I am great. I am so excited to have you here. Okay, so I just got to share this with everybody that's listening. And if you're watching, you'll see a little bit of a different, obviously you can see us versus just hearing us. But so Alyssa and I met a little while ago and we had a little chat probably at was it 5:30 in the morning your time? And I don't know, it was some insane early time for her and early for me. And we both, you can just tell we're moms. Hair was pulled back. There was no makeup on. We were just, and I loved it. I loved it. As soon as I saw you, I was like, yes, she's my girl.
These are my people.
Yes. And here we are now. And I'm like, it's amazing what a shower and combing my hair can do,
A little bit of makeup.
Yeah, it's all good. So for those of you watching, we gussied ourselves up for you, just for you. For those of you listening, hi, here's the better voice.
It would be kind of ironic to get on and talk about empowering moms while we look like haggard moms.
Yeah, exactly. But life throws you that way sometimes. Even to the best of it, even when you have the best routines or the schedules down, just sometimes or in the mornings, it's just like, I don't want to be pretty in the morning.
I'm just making it through. We're just surviving right now.
Yeah, that's my time. That's going to take away from my time. So obviously, I think you're getting the idea if you're listening or watching. We're going to have some fun with this episode. And so first off, Alyssa, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself so people can get to know you and fall in love with you?
Oh, thanks, Mitch. Like Mitch said, my name is Alyssa. I have 2 toddler boys, a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. I live in a very rural area of Washington State. I was unexpectedly pregnant with not only my first son, but also my second son. And it happened a couple months before COVID exploded. So my world was exploding. And then the rest of the world was exploding right after. So it has been an interesting journey to say the least. And that is why I started writing my book, Mommy Needs a Minute, because I really needed a minute.
That title is awesome, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Give me a minute. Just give me a minute.
1 minute. Yes, even writing it was like, here's one sentence, and then it's like fishy crackers, and then another sentence was like, watch Blaze for just a minute so I could just get this out for 1 second.
I have been there. I think one of my first emails, I even put that on. I'm like, okay, I am not succinct. Like my emails, they're long and they're kind of funny. I'm like, I get a little wordy, but I write like I talk. And just in it, I'm like, listen, I understand that you don't have a ton of time. I want to make this worth the read because you've probably already been interrupted. I know that I have written this sentence over again 4 times because someone has been, hey, mommy. So it's just the nature of the game. But yeah, for sure. So man, 2 unexpected pregnancies, both boys. You got 2 under 3 or 3 and under, I guess, right?
Yeah, 3 and under now.
There you go. Yeah. So that's some exciting times that you're in your household. So what was it that you were doing before all of this hit?
So I was working on my master's degree. I had just finished my undergraduate and I couldn't decide what I wanted to do or exactly what I wanted to be. So I have this Frankenstein undergraduate degree with an emphasis in anthropology, linguistics, teaching English as a second language. Um, I believe communications is in there and some pre-med as well. um, because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I ended up getting offered a full ride scholarship for a master's in English with an emphasis in technical writing in exchange for teaching English at the university. And so I was in the middle of doing that. A couple months into my program, was told that I would most likely never be able to have children. And if I did want to have kids, it would require some medical intervention. And that was okay with me because I didn't want kids. I was very focused on my career. My boyfriend at the time was very, very focused on his career. And so then when we unexpectedly found out that I was pregnant, we weren't exactly sure how to handle or process the news. And then COVID happened and we were processing all of that as well as processing big changes to our own lives. I decided to keep finishing my master's degree. I was really determined not to give up that side of myself. So I had my firstborn. A couple hours after giving birth, I was grading papers and submitting assignments because there's no maternity leave, especially when you're a graduate student who's working for the university to pay for your tuition. Things don't stop. So they're like, either you drop the program or you got to keep up. So I was determined to keep up. A couple weeks after that, my husband got a vasectomy because we were like, okay, one and done. We're good. We weren't planning on having kids. And a couple months later, I found out I was pregnant with my second. Very unexpected. We had just bought a house. I was a few months away from graduating, and I was like, what is going on? So I ended up putting my career, I ended up for a while trying to do both. The career that I'd always wanted, been working hard for years and years, and then also this new role of mother, living in a really rural area. We don't have a lot of childcare support out here. So I was trying to be a stay-at-home mom, which is what I thought I should do, as well as pursuing a career, which is what I wanted to do, and trying to balance the two roles with a husband who works 90 hours a week. So it was really challenging, and that is kind of the catalyst of the book, Mommy Needs a Minute, and talking all about maternal burnout and the lack of resources and support in our society for young and new moms. And specifically how interesting the Gen Z and millennial generation is situated as far as our parenting role models went, the feminist wave of the 1970s, the big tech boom in the late 90s, early 2000s, and how that's really impacting our perception of ourselves and how we parent.
I have like 10 things I want to go back and forth to. And I'm like, okay, let me try to remember this. So I'm going to say it all at once and then we'll go back. Okay. First of all, did your husband go back to the doctor and was like, I want a refund?
Yes. That was in and of its all. That was a whole nother story.
Wow. Well, and then these weren't planned pregnancies. And so, like we're kind of on the opposite spectrum there because, you were young and it was like, oh, hey. And I was older and it was like, okay, we're using all the doctors now because it's not happening. So that not have just kind of getting thrown into the world of motherhood when you were already so diehard on track to be doing. And in fact, as you talk about all of the different degrees that you had or all of the different emphases that you were focused on, I'm like, dang, it sounds like you were ready to go pack your bags and start traveling and, just check out the world, explore the world, teach English as a second language so you could go and explore a country and get to know it and dive into cultures like that. That's literally as that's what I'm like, that's what I would be doing if I had all of those degrees. Right. And so what becomes interesting to me is just how you just mentioned. And I think even when we plan it, this feeling of, okay, who am I supposed to be now that I have these children? And it really does. I mean, there's a very small portion where it doesn't, but really does fall on the woman. It's like,
It
you
does.
get to make the change in your life. Dad's still going to go to work. Dad's still going to do his thing. He'll show up at home. And I'm not disparaging dads in any means, because there are wonderful dads, and they, like, my husband supports me. I cannot complain. And at the same time, there was never a question about
Who was going to give up what?
who's going to give up what, no matter what, maybe if I was making $1 million, he'd be like, I'll be a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
With a nanny and a
With the
maid.
nanny.
I mean, he's even said that. He's like, I am not built for this. But it just kind of puts you in that world. So it's kind of like, no wonder you ended up writing this book, because you were just thrust in, like, oh, whoa, now I'm mom. It wasn't in my plans. And I'm still trying to, gosh, the fact that you're grading papers while you have a newborn on you, and yeah. So I don't know where the question was in that, but it was just that moment where I was like, how many times as women are we in this position, as women and mothers? I have to make a choice between what I want, what I need to do for my family in this type of regards. Again, men have those choices or those decisions put in front of them as well in a different way. But yeah, it's like, oh, I want, nope, can't. I want, can I? Okay, we're going to have to make some serious sacrifices here and, just rearrange. What was probably the biggest shock for you becoming a mother?
I think the biggest shock for me was honestly, like, identity loss. It was like I've built my entire identity around a certain structure of how I thought my life was going to look like, and what I wanted out of my life. I was very ambitious, very driven. I worked very hard. I worked as a dental assistant all through my undergraduate and as a barista on the weekend to put myself through my undergraduate degree debt free. So I went from that really, really fast paced, very career oriented, to all of a sudden being like, who am I? And how do and all the parts of myself that I used to define myself don't really apply anymore. Like, I can't be that person that I'd structured my whole life around to be. And now how do I fit this new version of myself in with my family without losing myself to my kids, but also without sacrificing my kids for the old life that I was like, I still want this life, and screw you, you're kind of in the way. And how to find that balance of, like, I don't want to lose who I am in my children, but I also don't want to lose my children by being all about what I wanted my life to be.
So you actually just reminded me of the last question from the first part. And that was in regards to parenting for Gen Z and millennials versus how they were parented. So what do you feel like the differences are? What do you feel like maybe has been improved upon? What do you feel like maybe we could go back to that? And where do you find yourself?
So something that I noticed was a lot of millennial generation were raised by moms either coming off the feminist train of the 1970s or really traditional moms who are firmly rooted. Typically, it tends to be more religious. Typically, it tends to be moms who are rooted in a more religious background, who have very traditional roots. The woman's place is in the home. As soon as you have kids, your job is to take care of the kids. That's it. You wait on your husband. When he needs something, you're there for him. That is your job. And I grew up with that more traditional mindset, but I also talk to women who've grown up with the more feminist, you take care of yourself first. You don't need a man. And what I found really interesting was, because we are women raised, many of us are women raised with these extremes. It's like we don't know how to find the balance. We're either stuck trying to have it all, the career and the kids, and then inevitably there's regret one way or the other, or we're stuck trying to fit in a role that we think we're supposed to be in that doesn't actually fit with the authentic version of ourselves. So if you maybe were raised with a really traditional mom, it's like, this is what I do. Now I got pregnant. I quit my job. I give everything up. I give everything up for my kids. That's what it means to be a mother. And I think because we have these two almost extremes, and then I feel like a lot of the millennial and Gen Zs are trying to find a middle ground, a balance between being like, I don't have to give up everything that I am for my children. I also don't have to abandon my children and be like, I'm working this high-powered career where I'm gone 60 hours a week, and it's like you're left to fend on your own. Here's the nanny. And then you have regrets later down the road because of that. So I think that's one aspect, is that trying to find that middle ground. And a lot of women I've noticed who are trying to find that middle ground don't know exactly which way to go. And so we try and do it all and have it all. And it ends up leading to extreme burnout and exhaustion, and because you can't do it all well. The other thing I notice with millennial parenting is we've got this beautiful age of information, which our mothers and our grandmothers didn't have before us. And it's a double-edged sword because it's so much information, and you can find information to contradict and agree with any aspect of parenting. And each side will convince you that if you don't do it the way they think it should be done, your kid is going to end up being a serial killer, have obesity, be unsuccessful in life, all the horrible things that as women and moms were like, oh, I could never do that to my child. And it removes the intuition, that element of just like, oh, maternal instinct. I know my baby so well. So while the experts might say co-sleeping is horrible, my baby needs this right now. I know that they need this right now. Or if the experts say you should get all of these different vaccinations, but you have, for whatever reason, maybe you have a hang up on hepatitis B vaccine, and you feel that like deep within you that might be something that your child shouldn't have right now. And later on you find out there was a reason why you felt that instinct. Just being in tune with your child on a lot of controversial topics, I feel like we've lost a lot of that because we have so much information. We can ask the chat rooms, we can ask whoever we need to ask, and they'll just be someone there to support whatever we do or don't do.
Yeah. And the loudest voice usually wins.
Exactly. And the voice and the voice that speaks into your fears, the one that tells you that if you don't do it this way, you will ruin your child. And as a mom, we want the best for our children. And so that's the quickest way to a mom's heart, is to tell her that she's failing if she doesn't do it a certain way. And then the final thing that I really noticed is we have a big, big movement of gentle parenting. And I think because many millennials weren't raised with that example of gentle parenting, we're trying to figure out what that looks like. There's so many jokes I'm sure you've seen on social media with the millennial mom being like, I tried to gentle parent and it's 9 a.m. and now I'm yelling and I don't know what I'm doing. Because it's
losing it.
Yeah, and I'm losing it. And I think it's because I think in part it's like we never had those role models. And then gentle parenting doesn't mean not having boundaries. And I think a lot of times it gets confused, and it's like, oh, I'm gentle parenting, but I don't know where the boundaries are, and I don't know how to enforce the boundaries, and I'm resentful at my children, and I'm resentful at me because I'm angry and I'm yelling and I'm not doing this gentle parenting thing right. And so it's kind of all those factors in addition to a plethora of others, but those are some of the big factors I noticed between how modern motherhood looks a little different and can be a little challenging in those regards.
Yeah. Well, and then there's social media where everything's posted and you're, constantly like, oh, they look like their kids are happier than mine, or they're doing things with their kids that I've never done. When I think of that. And
yes. And all those, that constant comparison. I have a chapter about that I talk about in my book, the judgment burnout, where it's like you're constantly judging others, you're constantly judging yourself and comparing yourself to others, and how exhausting that is all the time. That feeling of inadequacy being amplified across all your social media channels on a daily basis.
Yes. And it's true, because we do, I've been super guilty of watching someone and coming to a snap judgment and be like, oh my gosh, I totally want to do it that way. What am I thinking? And then later I'm like, okay, stop. And then you see them and you're like, I just had a bad snapshot of that moment. And if someone made a judgment on me in one of my bad moments, shame on me for doing that. But at the same time, it's just like, it's this natural comparison thing that we do, because all of life right now is about show me your best, show me. It's all just on display. And so much of it is so doctored and so curated. And so it's so hard to really know what's going on behind the scenes. Am I the only one thinking this way? Am I the only one feeling like I'm a hot mess? Or maybe I'm not a hot mess enough like this person. It's like both extremes. And then to go back to what you were saying about the information age, well, I think I read somewhere, I think the average person today is exposed to more information in one day than a person got in, I think, like 15 or 20 years, 100 years ago. And that's how much information. Yeah, it was something insane. I almost want to say 50, but I'm going to go with 15. We'll go on the conservative side. But literally, it's just because you think about it. Let's go back 100 years. And what's it, 1920, right? You're a mom. What is your focus of the day? Probably not working outside of the home. You're probably getting up. You're going to the market. You're fixing dinner. You're cleaning the house. You're getting your kids ready, or you're schooling them. One of the two, and most of your day is spent in some sort of preparation for a meal. Yes. Because we didn't have microwaves. We didn't have macaroni and cheese that was at the store shelves. So literally most of the day, and then maybe chatting with neighbors and having family time. So when is the information coming in for them? What were they comparing? It was like, oh, maybe like the little neighborhood gossip when you went to the store or you talked to your friends in passing on a sidewalk, versus now we fast forward 100 years and here we are today. And we all live inside our houses still. We never go out, but we know everything that's going on. And we know everything because we will Google it. And I am the best doctor because WebMD is in my pocket.
It's so true. And it's that constant overwhelm. And I think you also said it so well when you're like, you get a snapshot of somebody else's life through social media. And I think because we have so much time on social media, it becomes easier to judge even in real life when we're out around other moms and other people, because we have so much information to draw our comparisons from. And I just remember we lived 2 hours away from the nearest town. And so I had to get my boys up at 6 a.m. and drive 2 hours to town to do doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, all in the same day, with a 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old who were way overdue for their nap. And we were running out of snacks. And it was just the perfect storm by the time we got to the pediatric office. And I remember my little guy had a meltdown, exhausted, crying, inconsolable meltdown. And one of the moms there with her well-rested toddler, who probably only had to drive 5 minutes, who just got her out of bed, she looked at me and she goes, "I would never let my kids behave like that." And I remember how soul-crushing it was. Yes, and I remember how soul-crushing it was, especially as a young new mom. And it was like, oh, like you have no idea that I had to drive 2 hours and get them up an hour earlier than they normally do to be here on time. You have no idea that we've been here for 4 hours and we haven't had lunch or naps. And I'm just trying my best, and they're exhausted, and they've been doing great all day, considering that this is what they've had to go through just to get to this doctor's appointment. Like, that's why it's such a good reminder of like, oh, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes and in that mom's life. Like, most moms don't wake up in the morning being like, how can I ruin society and ruin my child today by being a total basket case mom? Like, this is my dream today, so let's get it done. So just a little bit of grace.
I know. I you know what? You're right. That's sometimes I might try that one day. I'm just gonna wake up. Okay, what can I do to just be the worst role model and go out there and make some people talk?
Yes. Talk about my horrible parenting. Let's get her done.
Yeah. Wait, I don't have to plan that out. It can just happen. Okay, so I want to go back to the fact that you have written this book and your kids are only 2 and 3, and that you were able to get your stuff together and figure this out so quickly, and then also at such a young age. So how did you start coming to your conclusions? Like, what was the moment for you, or moments that led up to, okay, I got to find something different, and now I need to share it with other people?
Okay, great question. So a little bit, well, warning alert, I guess, a little bit of a heavy story. I was a couple months pregnant with my second. Like we had said, we just bought our house. I was working from home full time. And I had, my little guy was almost 8 months old at that time. And I was exhausted working, pregnant, so sick, early pregnancy. And then my little guy and my husband was gone a lot. He was working a lot of overtime because we had this new house and now we have a new baby coming, and it was a little bit stressful. So my little guy was pretty sick, and I'd been up a lot the last few nights with him, and I was carrying him down our cement stairs, and I fainted. My body just totally shut down as I was walking down the cement stairs with him. I fell face first on my belly, and dropped my little guy, and his head hit the concrete. We ended up having to go to the emergency room. When we got there, they took an MRI and said he had internal brain bleeding and he needed to be helicoptered to a pediatric hospital. And they told me that chances were really high that he might not live. And it was very traumatizing, obviously, and there was so much guilt and shame, and the hospital ended up wanting to open an investigation because they thought that my husband was abusing us, because they're like, there's no way you just fainted and fell. And so it was very stressful.
Wow.
We ended up getting to the hospital, and the head pediatrician, who was a neurosurgeon who was going to do the surgery, wanted to do another MRI, and he was like, the bleeding in his brain has stopped. Like, we're just going to monitor him for a few days. We ended up monitoring him, taking him to specialists, and miraculously, he's perfectly fine. He's living a very full life, hitting all of his milestones. Everything is very healthy. It was a miracle. And it was the wake-up call, a little bit of the wake-up call, and the reality that I was like, what am I doing with my life, that I'm at a point of such burnout and exhaustion that I'm hurting my body. I'm hurting my kids' bodies. And I can't live like this. I can't live like this. So I started doing research, because I'm a big believer that many of our behaviors are rooted in our culture and our society. And a lot of our ideas aren't really our own unique ideas that are put there by all of the cultural and systemic outside things that impact us. So I was like, okay, what's going on in our society that is making women so burned out? Every mom I talk to, I shouldn't say every mom, the majority of moms that I talk to are overwhelmed and stressed and exhausted and overstimulated and undersupported and unhappy. And I was like, most moms I talk to, when I was like, oh, I'm so tired, does it get better? Does it get easier? Like, no, it's miserable. Welcome to motherhood. It's just miserable. And I was like, this is horrible. And so I decided that I was like, I'm not living like this anymore. And I'm not having my children live like this anymore. And I don't want them to think that this is okay. I don't want them to think that it's okay, whichever partner they end up choosing in their future. I don't want them to think that one of the partners, this is their role. Or that they feel like that is their role. Their role is to give everything for everyone all the time. I think that we model for our children how to interact with the world. And if they're watching me constantly burn myself out for everybody around me to the point of exhaustion, they're going to think that's normal, and that's something that they should be doing as well. And it perpetuates a culture and a society of overachieving burnout. So because of that, I was like, I'm going to start doing some research. And I looked into all of the social and cultural and economical ways that burning out mothers and pushing for this perfectionist image of modern motherhood, the superwoman mom, how that benefits our capitalistic society, and how that helps keep the problem from being, it makes women feel like the problem is me, I'm inadequate, not that our culture and our social support system is inadequate. And I really believe that that's the big shift for women to see, that you're not inadequate, you're not failing. There is something wrong with a culture and a society that is burning you out, burning you up, spitting you out, and then telling you it's your fault and you should feel guilty about it.
Yeah. And, to go back to a point that you brought up earlier where you have little support to help, it's just you guys, you're out in the country. And I understand the feeling, because for a long time, my husband and I, we were the only family that we have here. Yeah. And literally it was just like, and then both of my kids, neither of them would take a bottle. So they breastfed. So literally it was like every 2 hours for that first stretch of time, it was just like I had a baby attached to me, and you're just like, okay, I just need to get away, but I can't. Like I literally can't. And I had read a book, and I want to say it was called Hunt, Gather, Parent by Dr. Michaeline Duclef. And she had done some research like yourself, and basically was talking about the differences between Western culture and and she studied indigenous cultures and how they raised their kids. But basically Western culture is considered weird. And that's because we, back in, I don't know, whatever, the 1940s, we really went to that nuclear family where it's just mom, dad, and kids. And suddenly we shrunk down versus if you go back in time, you had multi-generational living, or even if you take it back a little bit further in time to in Europe where they had not just multi-generational, but like aunts and uncles and cousins. It was just kind of one big little commune, I guess you could say, but everyone lived together and everyone just kind of had the role. So mom wasn't the kids' everything. It was, okay, let's do this. And then, they'd go to the kitchen and Aunt Jenny, I don't know. Aunt Jenny was in there cooking. And so she'd teach them how to bake. And then they'd go outside and Uncle Joe was chopping some wood and he'd have them chop some wood. And then dad would call them out to the garden and they'd do this. And then, so they had all of this family support. And what was cool about that is not only did the burden come off of one person or two, it was spread out, and they were getting all of these different perspectives as they grew up. It wasn't just mom's perspective, dad's perspective. They had multi-generational perspective and influence into their life. They had different, all of these different people doing different things. And so I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I don't know that I would want every single member of my family to be living inside my house right now, but no, it's actually kind of a joke. We're always like, we're going to go buy a lot of land and we want you to move closer to us. We'll just have our own we'll put a pool in the middle. It'll be great.
I think that's such a good point too, because that's one of the quotes that I have in my book. I mentioned that, like, they say it takes a village, mama, and I'm so sorry there's no villages here. That's not something that we do anymore. And that's something that when I talk to new moms, so many of them said, I was like, tell me one thing about motherhood that you didn't expect. And the majority of them were like, it's so isolating. It's so lonely. I'm by myself all the time. And children are beautiful, wonderful balls of energy that will suck all of the life out of you in the best possible way. And so I think it's so important, like when you are living in that community, it's like, I'm burnt out and I'm drained because I'm just pouring into you all day, every day. And now it's grandma's turn and it's aunt so-and-so's turn and it's uncle so-and-so's turn and it's older cousin time and you're a contributing, helping, thriving member of the family who's learning all these skills from all these different people instead of being like all the time, mom, all the time. Because even trying to teach my boys skills and being like, oh, we do chores together, we wash dishes together. I'm like, I can't do it 24/7 all the time. It's exhausting. It's draining. Things don't get done. There's schedules that I still need to keep. And I feel like, whereas if it's like, oh, we're washing the dishes for a few minutes with mom, and then we're going to go help dad with the grass, and then we're going to go help Uncle Joe do XYZ. They're learning more skills, they're contributing to the family, and it's also done in community with adults who have the patience because it's being evenly distributed versus being overstimulated and overwhelmed because you're doing it by yourself all the time.
Yeah. And we forget that our kids get bored of us too. It's like they probably want a break from mom. Is like, oh my gosh, I'm always with mom. Can I just go out and play with my friends? And we forget that they have these feelings as well. And so, it becomes, you're right, so isolating. And I would imagine, because this is the kid thing, like they're always touching you everywhere, it's just like you're this jungle gym and no part of you is sacred. And I remember, oh my gosh, especially when my little girls were so young. And then like, if I sat down, one of them was just constantly just could not stay off me. So I literally, like, at the end of the day, we would just kind of, and this was during COVID too. So, there's nothing, it's not like we could go out and do a lot of things. So, and we were in this tiny little rental. So we would watch a show before the girls would go to bed, and I would stand next to the couch and watch it, because if I sat down, I was a jungle gym and I just couldn't get them off of me.
I couldn't do it.
And I'm sure there's some moms like, you should have had boundaries. I did have boundaries. It's just a little bit, when they're 1.5 and 2.5, the boundaries are a little bit blurry. They still are learning that. So then it affected my relationship because I'm like, don't touch me. I've been overstimulated. I've been overtouched. I just need my body to myself right now. And my poor husband's like, what did I do? It's like, I miss my wife. Like, remember when we used to snuggle? Yeah, and it's not, and he would try to take the kids away, but then of course they scream because it's like, oh no, I want mommy. So you're just like, oh, I'll just take
Yeah.
him. So,
I'll
but
just take
yeah,
it.
I'll just take him.
It's
I'll just
true.
do it.
And it
Yeah.
is that like as the mom, I think a lot of times your child associates you with the comfort, nurturing. Like my boys, my husband can be home, and if they fall or they get hurt or they have a nightmare or they don't feel well or they're hungry, it's like mom, always
Mom.
mom. Yeah.
Yeah.
If they want to have fun and like they're looking for a good time, then they're like, okay, we'll go hang out with dad. But the second they need something, a need met, then it's like mom all the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, totally, totally. So, what would you say is the what are the key things? Maybe like the one key thing or the few key things that you started to change after you've done all this research, you've written the book, and you realize I've got to change my ways. That changed life for you and has brought you more peace in motherhood.
I think the biggest thing was not being afraid to be authentically me and not being worried about what other people thought or comparing my choices for parenthood and mothering with everybody else's. So, one of the biggest things was like, if I want to have a career and have a career in addition to my kids, I I'm going to choose if I want to do that, or if I want to homeschool, or if I want to send them to public school, if I want to send them to private school. And I need to choose what aligns authentically with me and what I want my life to look like, not what everybody else tells me it should look like, or what the best choices are for my family or my kids. And once you kind of relieve yourself of that burden, I feel like it's easier to be happy with your life because you're making decisions that reflect what you need and what you want and what your family needs. Um, the other thing is, I think a lot of times we lose ourselves in motherhood. And I know I did. All the expectations of what I felt I needed to be and what motherhood should look like and who I was and how I carried myself and what I prioritized my time for now that I was a mom. And one of the biggest gifts I feel like I could give myself and my family was starting my identity. I did a little identity journal. I wrote down everything I didn't like and everything that I liked and all these different I am statements. And your identity will constantly be evolving. But motherhood is a huge transition. It's something that will forever change your life. And if you don't take the time to know yourself in that new role, you will lose yourself. And I think it's one of the hardest things to do as women. We don't feel like investing in ourselves is a good use of our time when we have such little time to do anything because we're pulled so many directions. But I think the biggest gift you can give yourself and your family is an authentic you, a you that you're comfortable with, a you that you know really well. And then you start parenting and making decisions from that place of authenticity instead of from a place of I'm just being pushed back and forth by whoever comes my way, whatever advice comes my way, and I feel out of control in my family, in my life, with my kids. The decisions are just made as a reaction instead of being made deliberately. And I'm like, be the reacting force in your life. Don't be the one who's constantly reacting to everything that's coming towards you.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, that's awesome. I'm smiling here because I'm like, I just did a show on this. I love you.
Thanks,
you pulling it right out of me. I love it. We're like so on the same page. It's awesome.
Oh, I love that. I think it is such a valuable message to share with women that it's like the gift of you is so invaluable. And if you lose yourself, your kids lose you, your partner loses you. The world misses out on all of the incredible things that you can bring if you're not busy trying to be somebody else that you think you need to be in order to fit this mothering role. Like,
Definitely.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of different mothers out there and a lot of different ways to raise your children. And there's a lot of ways to do it really well.
Well, I, for one, am grateful that you decided to step out and say, okay, I'm doing this my way. I'm going to figure this out and to go out and to spread the message because I think, we need a lot of voices to get out there because there's a lot of mamas out there and they're in a lot of different places. So the more, the merrier. So thank you so much. I'm so excited for you. So with that, you got to tell people, okay, name of your book again, where do they find it and where do they find you?
All right, so the book's name is Mommy Needs a Minute, From Burnout to Empowerment. You can find it on Amazon. There's an Audible version, an ebook version, as well as a paperback version. So I know busy mamas, sometimes it's easier to just pop a headphone in and listen instead of having to sit down and find the time to read. And then if you want to connect with me, I love hearing about your parenting journey. I love sharing mom stories. I love offering support to each other, because I do think it can be really lonely. If you ever need an unbiased, non-judgmental external force who's not a part of your life to just listen, I always love to connect. You can find me on Facebook at Alyssa Brade. You could always also send me an email, alyssabradeauthor@gmail.com, and I love to connect and chat with you.
Awesome. That's great. I'm sure you're going to get some reach outs and be like, I felt that.
That
you took the words out of my mouth.
Oh, thanks, Mitch.
Oh yeah, this was fun. I feel like I'm just chatting up with a girlfriend, and like I said, you're just pulling thoughts out of my mind and just being able to just share so freely. And yeah, we threw the caveats in there because you got a wide group of people listening, and so you always want to make sure, because it's so interesting when I do the podcast here, because there's things that I go into and I'm like, well, shoot, they don't really know the whole story, and they're going to be like, oh my gosh. What did she? She said, she sewed this and that, because it's so easy when you're listening, or you might be going like, oh, thank God someone else is thinking the same way as I am. But, for me, it's like going back to the decision that falls upon women. Just because I say this doesn't mean that I'm disempowering men and that I think all this. And so, it's just interesting that I know I'm going off on a totally different tangent, and I'm just like totally extending this episode, but that's just one more forum where we feel like, well, I can't just let this loose without having to give this disclaimer, and this disclaimer, so that someone doesn't come back and be like, well, you're this bashing, or you're this doing that. And it's like, no, I'm not. I'm just venting with a mom, and we're just being real. And so I appreciate that conversation with you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Me too. And that's why I think it's so important to have those safe spaces where you can be authentic. And it's like, you're not a bad mom if you're overwhelmed and overstimulated from being with your kids. You're not a bad mom if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, if you choose to send them to public school, if you decide that you want to have a career. It's like, if you're not a bad mom or a woman or a man basher, you don't hate men, if you just recognize that a lot of times it does fall on the women. Very traditionally, childcare does fall on the women. There's a lot of science, there's a lot of studies behind that. Like, it doesn't mean anything bad about men. It just means that this is the reality we live in. The primary caregiving role often goes to the female in the relationship.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. I know your book is going to be great. I can already tell just from the information that you've put out in this episode, and I think anyone would do really well to read it and probably feel connected and a big sense of relief. And like I said, to have all of these realizations so early in your journey and so early in life, that's awesome, because you just have a great trajectory in front of you. And I'm excited to watch it and see what you do and where you go, because I have the feeling it's going to be big and far. So
thank you. That means so much to me. I'm very excited that I got to share. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. Thank you to the listeners for sharing your time with me. It was great to take a minute together. Well, 44 exactly.
Right? Definitely. Okay. So you know what? I haven't told a joke in a while. I feel so bad because I usually end my episodes with jokes. I haven't done that for a long time. So I'm trying to think of a joke I haven't shared in a while that maybe you haven't heard. No, I've told that one. Okay. Well, we'll tell my daughter's favorite joke of the day for right now. Okay. So my 5-year-old says this one, and she's got this little pipsqueak voice, right? So, it's always funny coming from a little kid. But what did the fish say when it swam into a concrete wall?
What?
Damn. It's like the one time I can get away with saying that word.
I know. I was like, you gotta love how imaginative 5-year-olds are. Of like, I can't say this word, but I can say it when it's a joke.
Exactly. Oh, man. And she gets away with it like nobody's business. Okay. I feel good. I told a joke. Okay. So now with that, we're going to wrap it up because I know my mamas on here are busy and we're already going into my 45-minute mark here. And, I always joked around in the beginning, I'm going to try to keep these at 20 and 30 minutes. It never happens. So if you're with me, thank you so much. We appreciate you sticking around. Most importantly, I just hope that you heard some of your story and you got some laughs out of this and you felt a little better out of this. So go listen to this with a friend, sit down, compare notes. I'd love to hear what you have to say about all this. Drop us a comment. And if you could subscribe and share this with a friend, like I said, I would be ever grateful to you. So with that, I'm going to leave you until next week. Make it fun, make it rich, and bye-bye.